The bus rolled slowly through the dusty road of the Texas plains, the wheels crunching over gravel, heat shimmering across the horizon. Inside sat 42 Japanese prisoners of war, their uniforms sun-faded, their faces hollowed by weeks of travel from the Pacific Front. Lieutenant Haruto Arai sat near the window, his wrists resting loosely in chains. He watched the strange landscape unfold, flat land, endless sky, not an ocean in sight. His mind drifted back to the blue Pacific and the island jungle where he'd been captured after his platoon fell to the Americans. The bus hissed to a stop before a wooden gate crowned with barbed wire. A white sign read, Camp Huntsville, U.S. Army Internment Facility. A line of guards awaited them. Some chewed gum. One leaned casually on his rifle, waving as the POWs stepped off the bus. The air smelled of dust and cattle. Haruto had imagined this moment many times, humiliation, interrogation, perhaps even death. Yet the guards didn't shout. They didn't strike. They handed the prisoners canteens of cold water. One of them, a freckled young man barely older than Haruto, smiled and said, "Welcome to Texas, fellas." It was not what he had expected of the enemy. 2. The camp. Camp Huntsville sprawled across hundreds of acres, fenced but strangely open. Beyond the barracks lay fields of corn, a baseball diamond, and even a small library. Sergeant Daniel Morgan, an American guard who'd served briefly in the Pacific before being reassigned stateside, watched the new arrivals with quiet curiosity. He'd seen captured Germans before, but the Japanese were different, smaller, quieter, more distant, their discipline unshakable. The commandant, Colonel Reynolds, briefed his men that afternoon, "We treat them fairly. They're soldiers, not animals. Follow Geneva rules to the letter. Remember, how we treat them reflects who we are." Haruto didn't understand most of the English being spoken, but he understood tone, and tone mattered. There was no malice here. That night, he sat on his bunk in the long wooden barack, listening to the hum of cicadas outside. Across from him, Corporal Saito whispered, "They treat us like guests." "Don't be fooled," Haruto muttered. "It's strategy. They want to soften us." But part of him wasn't sure. 3. The first meal. The next morning, the prisoners were led to the mess hall. The smell hit them before they entered, grilled meat, onions, something rich and intoxicating. The cooks, American servicemen in white aprons, dished out thick patties on round buns, each glistening with melted cheese and something red. Bottles of dark liquid stood on the tables, fizzing faintly. Haruto frowned. "What is this?" he asked in halting English. A smiling cook replied, "Hamburger. And Coke. You'll like it." Saito eyed the sandwich suspiciously. "Meat between bread." "Barbaric," he muttered in Japanese. But hunger won. The first bite startled them, savory, juicy, smoky, unlike anything they'd tasted. The Coca-Cola followed, cold, sweet, and bubbling, dancing on the tongue like fireworks. Haruto blinked. His mouth tingled. For a moment, the war fell away. Around him, men who had marched through jungles and storms began to eat silently, then hungrily. One of them, Sergeant Ishikawa, who had not spoken since capture, suddenly laughed, a sound so strange in that room that even the guards looked up. "Oh my," he said aloud, "delicious." The laughter spread. For the first time in months, they were not soldiers, not prisoners, just men eating something wonderful. Later, Haruto sat quietly, the empty Coca-Cola bottle in his hand. He turned it in the sunlight, mesmerized by its shape. How could something so simple feel so powerful? 4. Cultural shock. Days turned to weeks. Life in the camp followed rhythm, roll call, work detail, meals, recreation. The POWs built furniture, tended gardens, and even learned English. American guards taught them baseball. Morgan often lingered by the fields, watching Haruto swing the bat. The young lieutenant was serious, precise, as if every movement were part of a military drill. But slowly, he began to smile more. One afternoon, Morgan approached him with 2 bottles of Coke. "Break time," he said. Haruto hesitated, then accepted. The two sat in the shade of a tree, the air buzzing with insects. Morgan cracked open his bottle. "So, you ever play baseball before?" Haruto searched for the word. "Base, ball? No. In Japan, we have, sumo." Morgan grinned. "Yeah, I've heard of that. You'd make a good pitcher, though." They drank in silence for a while. The Coke was cold and sweet, almost absurdly so in the heat. Haruto asked quietly, "Why, you treat us good? We enemy." Morgan shrugged. "War's over, at least for you. Your people, same as me. I guess, maybe that's the whole point." Haruto didn't know how to reply. In his homeland, surrender was shame. Here, kindness was power. It confused him. It frightened him. The letters from home. Weeks later, the Red Cross delivered letters. Haruto's was from his younger sister, Aiko, written in careful script. "We do not know where you are, only that you live. The government says the war is still glorious. But our city burns. Mother is sick. If you can, survive. That is enough." He read the letter over and over, tears pricking his eyes. The words "survive" and "enough" felt heavy. That night, he wrote back in Japanese. "I am alive. The Americans are not demons, they feed us. I ate something called a hamburger. It was, strangely moving. Tell mother I will return." He paused, unsure whether to include that last line. Return to what? 6. The discussion. One evening, the Japanese officers gathered secretly behind the barack, the air thick with the scent of pine. Captain Nakamura, the eldest among them, spoke in a low voice. "We must not forget who we are. These comforts are a weapon. They wish to break our spirit." Saito protested, "But, sir, they treat us better than our own commanders did. Is it wrong to appreciate decency?" Nakamura's eyes flashed. "Honor is not comfort. We represent the emperor." Haruto listened silently. He respected Nakamura, but something inside him was changing. The next day, he saw Morgan giving a Coke to a German POW, both laughing over a game of cards. Americans, he thought, had a strange way of waging peace. 7. The collapse. Summer faded into autumn. The war in the Pacific ended. News reached the camp: Japan had surrendered after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The POWs gathered in stunned silence. Nakamura fell to his knees, muttering prayers. Saito covered his face. Haruto felt the world tilt beneath him. That night, he couldn't sleep. The barracks buzzed with whispered disbelief. He found Morgan sitting outside, looking up at the stars. "It's over," Haruto said in English, voice breaking. Morgan nodded slowly. "Yeah. It's over." Haruto sank onto the step beside him. "We lost." Morgan took a long breath. Everyone loses something in a war. For a long while, they sat in silence. Then Morgan handed him a sandwich, a hamburger, warm and fragrant. Haruto stared at it. The first time he'd eaten one, he'd been shocked by its flavor. Now, it felt like a bridge between two worlds. He took a bite. His hands trembled. Tears welled in his eyes, unbidden. "Why?" he whispered. "Why you give this to me now?" Morgan looked at him gently. "Because now you can just be a man, not a soldier." Haruto lowered his head. The tears came freely then, for his fallen comrades, for his mother, for everything lost and everything unexpectedly found. Around the camp that night, others wept quietly over their food, the hum of America, hamburgers, Coca-Cola, laughter, drifting through the air. They weren't breaking from hunger or cruelty. They were breaking from kindness. By winter, the camp began releasing prisoners back to Japan. Trucks arrived to take them to the port. Haruto packed his few belongings, a worn letter, a baseball glove given by Morgan, and an empty Coke bottle he couldn't bear to throw away. Before he left, Morgan approached. "Take care of yourself, Lieutenant." Haruto bowed deeply. "You, teach me something. Not enemy, not friend, but human." Morgan smiled. "That's good enough." They shook hands, awkwardly, sincerely. As the truck rumbled away, Haruto looked back one last time at the camp, at the baseball field, at the cafeteria where he had first tasted America. Tokyo was unrecognizable. Rubble, silence, the smell of ash. Haruto's mother had died during the bombings. Aiko survived, thin and weary, her eyes hollow but bright with recognition when she saw him. They shared rice in their small rebuilt home. Aiko asked, "Was it terrible? The camps?" Haruto hesitated. "No. It was, confusing." He told her about the hamburgers and the strange sweet drink that fizzed like laughter. She listened, wide-eyed. "Did you like it?" she asked. "Yes," he said softly. "And I hated that I liked it." Aiko nodded, understanding. Japan was rebuilding. American culture seeped into the streets, jazz, neon signs, diners. Coca-Cola appeared in corner shops, hamburger stands popped up near train stations. One afternoon, Haruto, now a schoolteacher, stopped before a small stall. A sign read, "American hamburger, 50 yen. Inside, a young man flipped patties on a grill, the aroma exactly as he remembered. He sat at the counter, ordered one, and waited. When the hamburger came, wrapped neatly in paper, he stared at it for a long moment. Then he took a bite. The flavor rushed back, smoky, tender, absurdly human. The world outside blurred. He thought of Morgan, of Camp Huntsville, of that summer when enemies shared food and something in him began to heal. A bottle of Coca-Cola stood beside the burger. He uncapped it, the fizz rising like memory. He raised it slightly, as if in a silent toast. "To peace," he whispered. 11. Epilogue. In later years, Haruto would write essays for his students, telling them not of war's glory but of its humanity. He wrote, "The enemy is often a mirror. When we drink his drink, taste his food, we taste his heart. In that taste, I found not defeat, but the beginning of forgiveness." Aiko later found his notebook after his death, tucked beside that same empty Coca-Cola bottle he had carried home from Texas decades earlier. The label was faded, the glass slightly chipped, but it gleamed softly in the morning light, a relic not of war, but of reconciliation, and somewhere across the ocean, in a Texas attic, an old American guard named Daniel Morgan kept a baseball glove, signed faintly in Japanese. Arai Haruto, friend. Tokyo, 1969. The city no longer smelled of ash. Now it hummed with neon and exhaust, jazz spilling from coffee shops, and the buzz of a nation reborn. Skyscrapers rose where craters once gaped. The children of war were now engineers, clerks, students. Haruto Arai was 60 years old. His hair had silvered, his back had curved slightly from years of standing before blackboards. His students at the local high school knew him as Arai-sensei, the quiet history teacher who always paused for too long before answering questions about the war. That spring, an envelope arrived with an American postmark. The letter, written in careful English, began. "Dear Mr. Arai. My name is Susan Morgan. I am the daughter of Daniel Morgan, who served as a guard at Camp Huntsville. My father often spoke of a Japanese officer he befriended there. He called you Lieutenant Arai, the one who taught me about honor. My father passed away last year. Among his things, we found a baseball glove with your name written inside. I wanted to let you know that he never forgot you. I will be in Tokyo this summer with a student exchange program. If you are willing, I would be honored to meet you." Haruto read the letter 3 times. His hands trembled slightly as he folded it back into the envelope. That night, he opened his small wooden box, the one he had kept since the war, and took out the old Coca-Cola bottle. The glass had dulled with age, but under the lamplight it still glimmered faintly, as though holding the memory of a Texas sun. He whispered in Japanese, "Morgan-san, you still reach across the ocean." The meeting. They met at a small cafe near Ueno Park, a place that served both coffee and American sandwiches. Susan Morgan was in her 20s, bright-eyed, with her father's easy smile. She recognized Haruto immediately. "Mr. Arai?" she asked in fluent Japanese. He bowed slightly. "You look like him," he said. They spoke for hours. She told him about Daniel Morgan's life after the war, how he'd become a schoolteacher too, in a small Texas town, and how he used to tell his students that the best lesson I ever learned came from an enemy. Haruto listened, silent for a while. Then he said softly, "He was not enemy. He was bridge." Susan smiled. "He said you loved baseball." Haruto chuckled. "He tried to teach me. I was terrible." They laughed together, and in that laughter Haruto felt time collapse, the decades, the war, the guilt, all dissolving into the quiet understanding between two people who carried the memory of men who once shared a meal. Before they parted, Susan handed him a small package. "My father kept this for you. He asked that if we ever found you, we should return it." Inside was a faded photograph, two young men sitting under a tree in Texas, each holding a bottle of Coca-Cola, smiling awkwardly at the camera. Haruto stared at it for a long time. "I had forgotten my own face," he said finally. The invitation. A few months later, Haruto received another letter, this time from the American Embassy. Susan had spoken to the Cultural Exchange Committee. They were organizing a conference in Texas titled, "From Enemies to Allies, Human Stories of the Pacific War." They invited him to speak. Haruto hesitated. The idea of returning to America, the land where he had once been a prisoner, both frightened and intrigued him. Yet when he looked again at the photograph, something inside him stirred. That winter, he boarded a plane for the first time in his life. Returned to Texas. The air smelled the same, dry, warm, tinged with sage and dust. The flat horizon stretched endlessly beneath a sky too big to believe. He arrived in Huntsville to find the camp long gone. In its place stood a university campus. A plaque near the entrance read, "On this site stood Camp Huntsville, 1942 to 1945, where thousands of prisoners of war were held. May their memory remind us that humanity endures even in conflict." Haruto stood before it, hands folded, heart trembling. A local historian approached. "You must be Mr. Arai," he said warmly. "We've heard a lot about you. Daniel Morgan's daughter helped organize this visit. Would you like to see something?" They led him to a small museum room inside the campus library. Behind glass lay artifacts from the old camp, uniforms, baseballs, faded letters, and there, on a small wooden shelf, sat a familiar object. A greenish glass bottle. Coca-Cola. Beneath it, a caption read, "Shared Humanity, Texas, 1945. Haruto smiled faintly. "He kept it," he murmured. That evening, they took him to a diner, a modern one with chrome stools and neon lights. The waitress handed him a menu filled with burgers and sodas. When the meal arrived, he stared at the hamburger for a long moment, then lifted it gently. The first bite brought tears to his eyes. The taste hadn't changed, smoky, sweet, absurdly simple. Susan, sitting across from him, asked softly, "Is it as you remember?" Haruto nodded, voice trembling. "Exactly. It tastes like forgiveness. Baseball under the stars." The next day, the university held a small commemorative baseball game between Japanese and American students. Haruto was the guest of honor. When they handed him a ball to throw the ceremonial first pitch, he hesitated. He could almost feel Morgan's presence beside him, guiding his arm as he once had under the Texan sun. He threw. The ball arced high and true. The crowd cheered. For a moment, Haruto felt young again, the POW who had once learned to laugh with his captors. Later that night, Susan walked him through the quiet field. Fireflies flickered among the grass. "My father would have loved this," she said. Haruto nodded. "He taught me that mercy is also courage." He looked up at the stars. "You know, in Japan we say that the spirits of the dead become stars. Perhaps he is watching." Susan smiled. "Then I think he's smiling." Memory. Before returning to Japan, Haruto visited Morgan's grave in a small Texas cemetery. The headstone was simple, engraved with the words, "Daniel Morgan, 1919–1968. He believed in the goodness of men." Haruto placed the photograph on the grave and whispered in Japanese, "Arigato, Tomodachi, thank you, my friend." He poured a small bottle of Coca-Cola, brought from the diner, over the soil, a libation of peace. The fizz rose and faded in the sun. Legacy. Years later, back in Tokyo, Haruto would tell his students about that journey. He would show them the photo and the small bottle he'd been given as a gift by the museum. History, he told them, is not only written in battles and treaties. It is also written in meals shared, in laughter between enemies, in forgiveness given across oceans. When he died peacefully at 78, Aiko placed that bottle on his altar beside a single hamburger bun, a quiet offering for the man who had once tasted America and found in it the flavor of peace. And far away in Texas, the university kept his photograph on display beside Morgan's glove. Beneath it, a new plaque read, "In memory of Haruto Arai and Daniel Morgan, who proved that even across war, kindness endures."